Hey, friends, want to welcome you back to the next episode of One Great Question. Our guest today, I'm incredibly excited about because I got to know Mike Kim through a mutual friend, Jeff Goins, who is kind enough to make my first book not terrible by writing it alongside me. But Mike and Jeff have been friends for a long time, and Mike himself is a personal branding strategist and himself also a best-selling author of the book, You Are the Brand, and somebody who I want to become more like, and that he's a trusted advisor to some of the most respected voices in places of leadership and business, and has helped thousands of experts and entrepreneurs clarify who they are and what they stand for. And in kind of a world obsessed with things like visibility and optimization, at least what I've seen of Mike's work, it seems that he's asking a deeper question, which is, well, who are you before the brand? And so, Mike, I just want to say thanks and welcome to the show.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Carl. I hope I can live up to that intro. So we'll see what happens. No, it's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, we talk about the intro and the bio, and, everybody's got one of those, and it feels equally awkward anytime somebody brings me on one of these things, which, it's happened all of three times, most of them with my mom inviting me onto her podcast, but you do it in serious places. But I'm now jokingly saying in the format of our show, the question that I really want to open up with is, if we were to get a one-on-one interview with 8-year-old Mike, and he was looking at now Mike in this season of your life and career, what would he either be proud of or wowed by? Almost kind of like the 8-year-old Mike would be going, hold on, you got to do what? Or you're in the midst of doing what? What's the thing that would kind of light up the 8-year-old version of you?
I think that he doesn't have a job and can do what he wants.
Yeah.
Can kind of is living outside of the structures that he was taught were normal. We are Korean by descent. I was born in the States and lived here, but a lot of the culture is around, you become a doctor or you're a lawyer. That's it.
Right.
You can become a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. And that's it. That's three options. Now that has
No
done a
pressure.
lot.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. I mean, my parents weren't that strict on me or my sister along those roads, but that's definitely an influence. Like it's a narrative that you hear just sort of buzzing in the background because your friends parents are all saying the same thing, and your friends are sort of going down that track. And there's a huge emphasis on academic education, and I just like wasn't good at that stuff.
Yeah.
I was average. I was decent. I
Mhm.
was not exceptional. And so I think when I was young, I just felt like life was just a sentence that you were just going to go through this life, and this is what it was. There wasn't anything better. My parents struggled with money. We didn't have a lot growing up. We moved around a lot. We got kicked out of homes a lot, and so I felt trapped. I'm like, this is our life, and the only way out is to study more, and I am not good at that either.
Yeah.
So all up, all in, I think if I could see that kid and say, hey, guess what? If you keep your head down and keep working and keep growing, you're not going to have to work a day in your life. You'll have to work, but it won't be labor.
Yeah.
It'll be something meaningful to you. And I think that's something that is a surprise. I never intended for that to happen, but that's the way that my life went. So I'm very,
Yeah.
very grateful. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I can now imagine 8-year-old you with a smile on his face going, wait, what? That's a possibility? Like, there's not just doctor, lawyer, failure. There's a fourth door that I could walk through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what a gift to be able to give that vision. And, similar story for me, coming as an immigrant from South Africa and fled Central Africa into the US. And, the first couple of years, my folks and I lived here. We were a family of 6 living on $8,000 a year. And it's this idea of, my story is a little bit the opposite, that academics kind of came kind of easily. But in the same way, I still didn't know what to do with it. Like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
graduate, top of your class, and then now what? Like, what is the thing? Because we were, unlike the Korean culture, it sounds like there was lots of, that's the water that you're swimming in. We were the only 6 South Africans that I knew in East Tennessee. And so it's like, okay, it's just us. There's nobody else going, oh, you're going to, take over your dad's business. You're going to do this, that, the other. And so I often think of, now I'm going to be 45 this year, looking back going, the 8-year-old is going, hold on, you make money doing what? I didn't know that that was a thing. Like, and because it may not have been, almost 40 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. The question when you're a kid is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
And I just didn't have a lot of options.
Mhm.
I didn't see this until an adult.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very grateful. I think part of the message that I have for people is that if you want that, it's available.
Yeah.
If you'll just open your eyes and open your mind and be willing to learn and
Mhm.
grow and put yourself in difficult situations where you're forced and stretched to grow, it's possible.
Mm.
I'm glad I went down this road when I still had younger man energy. When I was in my mid late 30s, there was a different gear that I had. I mean, it was just, and now I'm more grounded. I would like to think, and working through things at a slower, more deliberate and intentional pace.
Mhm.
But going back to that 8-year-old kid, I knew that like I had always a hard charging engine if I was passionate about something.
Mhm.
And I'm fortunate. I'm very, very fortunate that I kind of this all unfolded for me. So I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah. Well, maybe for those of us who don't know kind of your trajectory, maybe you could take us through your 20s and 30s and go, okay, because I know you as, an author and a brand specialist. And I think the thing that resonates a lot with me with your work is there's just a sense of authenticity to it that feels a little bit counter to, I think, most of the brand work that exists out in the world now, especially in the world of social media. So, Mike's a great follower if on socials, if you like to see travel and, some delicious food every once in a while. But I think the thing that has resonated, even as somebody who's new to your work, is it feels 100% like Mike all the time. It doesn't feel like there's any difference between who you are and the brand and the thing that you're doing out in the world. So maybe you could walk us through how, with this, this big engine of yours, when you found something you were passionate about, what did you start doing in your 20s and 30s to find yourself now apparently unemployed in your 40s and loving that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the branding, this term it's actually surprised me because I got into this whole personal branding industry maybe like 10, 12 years ago. And I remember the coaches and mentors that I had at the time were like, that's stupid. Don't do that. No, nobody talks about being a coach. And I'm like, no, I think there's something here. I don't know where it's going to go, but let me just explore this idea of marketing a person
Mm-hmm.
and having an identity. For me, and for many of us, it wasn't some industry that you tried to get into. It's actually a human phenomenon. I remember the first time that I probably came across this idea of whatever a personal brand is was in college.
Mm.
At that time, America Online was all the rage. That's all we had, those big CDs that you had to, stuff into a computer and it would dial up your modem. I was a 90s college kid, right?
Yeah, come
So
on.
um you've got that going on. And all my friends one year were like on instant messenger. For those of you too young to understand what that is, that's basically the precursor to DMs.
Yeah. Oh
It's the
man,
ancestor of
AIM.
DMs. Yeah, AIM, right?
AIM.
And
I still,
all
when you say that even now, Mike, it makes me remember like the girl you had a crush on, and you're like, when you heard that little noise, and that person was on, and you might start a chat, you're like, oh, it's the butterflies of almost like
yeah,
like
yeah.
in the '70s of walking into a crowded bar and knowing the girl was going to be there.
Yeah, I mean you stole my thunder. So
Yeah,
like basically I'm sitting there, all my friends are like, "Hey, get on instant messenger." And I'm like, "All right, cool." I pop in the CD and I'm like paralyzed because you have to come up with a screen name.
yeah.
So I'm like, all right, what do I? It's just kind of odd that even at that time, before any of this online stuff existed, I was worried about how it would come across online. I was like, I have to have a
Mm-hmm.
cool screen name. It has to be smart. It has to be clever. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
have an idea. I'll do this. It'll sound really masculine and cool, and all the girls will like me. And so I came up with a screen name, Mykovich. It's
Come on.
terrible. And my friends when they all saw me, they were making fun of me. They're like, "What? It sounds Russian. Are you like
Yeah.
you sound like a Russian guy?" So they'd say like, "Greetings, comrade Mykovich." I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And then this girl that I liked, she knew I liked her. She's like, "Hey, I got a good screen name for you." I was like, "What's that?" She's like, "Myko Bitch." And I was like, all right, okay. And so like that hurt.
Yeah.
She's probably living a
Right.
miserable life now. But anyways, like when you really think about that in all seriousness, that phenomenon,
Mm,
when you started your Instagram account or felt like you needed to update your username or whatever that is, like where's all that come from? It is an identity expressed for a public purpose.
mhm,
And that's really all personal branding is. So when I was growing up, we just thought of that as reputation. You apply for a job and you have a resume, you hopefully build a good reputation, a good network. But now, because of social media, you have ideas, you have visuals, you have video, and it's also an arena to showcase your personality. So I always tell people that a personal brand is an identity comprised of your ideas, your expertise, your reputation, and your personality.
mm,
Now, if you think about it through that lens, I grew up around that. I spent a lot of time as a kid going to church. That's a very Korean thing to do. We go to church a lot. I was involved in music a lot. I probably sat in thousands of services. And if you really take the whole spiritual element out of that, I saw thousands of keynote speeches.
mhm,
I saw thousands of performances.
mhm.
I spent thousands of hours on a stage doing music and doing all this stuff. So there are things that I probably caught more than were taught.
Mhm.
And I developed sort of this sixth sense or this taste or this, ability to see like, well, that dude definitely has it, whatever it is. That guy doesn't have it, but he has something else and different. So I do believe all of us have something that can be magnified for a public express purpose. And so that's sort of where it all started for me. When I left that world behind, I missed having a creative outlet. So I just started blogging.
Yeah.
And that's where I discovered nobody read my blog, not even my mom. And so maybe I should learn this. And I Googled how to blog and I came across some guy named Michael Hyatt. I had no idea who he was. He probably just had good Google SEO at the time.
Yeah.
And I followed his podcast. And that's how I met, our mutual friend, Jeff Goins. Jeff was promoted a lot by Michael at the time for
Yeah.
being a great writer and a great blogger. And so I just followed what these guys were saying and I put my stuff out there and I took a marketing job. This is a long story, but long story
It's a great
short,
story. Yeah, yeah.
I just shared what I did at my marketing job online and I had people follow me and come to me and ask me for help and ask me to do some work for them. And so this was back in like 2013.
Mm,
And it actually wasn't, I thought I was late to the game at
yeah.
that time. And I
Yeah.
was really early now in retrospect. But that's why I keep saying I just sort of stumbled into this. But
Yeah.
I had those skills and I had that awareness and I had the ability to express what I was learning. I think that's one of my the things that have helped me get where I am today. That I've just
Mm.
tried to do the difficult work of making things simple for people.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's the Einstein idea that true genius is taking complicated things and making them simple. And I jokingly, when my wife, I think sometimes is surprised by the amount of work or travel that's involved, she's like, "So, what do you think it is that people really are wanting?" I was like, "I think I'm just always the biggest 8-year-old in the room, so I have to quickly synthesize and simplify things, and then everybody thinks somehow that's smart." And it's like, no, no, this is just the only way I could understand the hard thing that you're doing, and then that becomes, a brand or a framework or something like that. Um, Fascinating. So for you, then what did that turn into? So you were in kind of the blogosphere, and then people started asking you for branding work. How did that then kind of matriculate into what you're doing now?
It just everything just compounded on one like one on top of the other. So I was the head of marketing for this company. So
Hmm.
that was an edge that I had. I could say that like, look, I'm sharing advice from running a real business and being responsible for their marketing. I'm not just blogging. I'm actually sharing real world ideas, and it happened very quickly. I learned how to write stuff that would connect. Big thanks to Michael and Jeff and people like that who gave me some pointers along the way. And definitely, I mean, their courses and their programs were helpful. I started podcasting the very next year. I started podcasting in 2014. And then every single year, I just thought about adding a critical skill to my
Mm,
my skill set. I think a lot of people look at those who are established and have gone further down the road. And I love this quote by Gary Keller from Keller Williams, the real estate guy. He says, "Success is sequential, not simultaneous."
Mm.
And I love that. And if I went back and looked at my journey, all I did in 2013 was consistently blog. Every Monday, hell or high water, there was a post coming out. I didn't care if people read it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I had to be consistent. 2014, same thing. I started adding podcasting onto my blogging.
Mm-hmm.
2015, I then had an audience. I went full time.
Mm.
I basically launched my own course in 2015 and went full time in my own business in
Wow.
about 2 years from
Yeah.
starting blogging. And that was that consistency. At 2016, I started my own live event, and everything just snowballed over the last decade. The big key was, and I've been friends with and I've worked with a lot of high performers across all industries, and I can honestly say the thing that really sets them apart is they just don't stop. They're consistent. I've met so many, I'll just say it, weak, excuse making people who want these results of greatness and can't show up every single week and stick to a commitment that they make.
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm not perfect in every other area of my life,
Mm-hmm.
but business, I wanted it bad enough that I was willing to lose sleep, to stay up late, to be obsessive about learning, to be obsessive about being hard on myself and evaluating myself and saying, am I writing stuff that my mentors would want to read? That was always the bar.
Oh, what a great question.
Yeah. I was like, I'm the CMO of a company. I actually have some knowledge that can be helpful to a guy like Michael Hyatt.
Mm-hmm.
He was the CEO of a company. He probably had a CMO. Let me pretend I was a CMO.
Yeah.
What would I need to write so that this guy would be like, these are great insights. Thanks for sharing this. And I did. And he
Mm-hmm.
did. He would
Mm-hmm.
share my blog posts once in a while, like on Twitter. And I was like, okay, I'm on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gearing towards the right signal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't understand people who can't show up for themselves. They say they want this or this or that, and they can't. I saw this great meme, Carl. It's one of those like affirmations memes,
Yeah.
right? And with like the picture of a beach, right, at night with the sunset. It's beautiful. It's like, dear God, please give me the strength to move forward in my life and overcome these challenges. And then it says, God says, it's an effing email, Bob. Like,
Yeah.
dude, we could be doing so much more difficult stuff with our. It's a freaking email.
Mm-hmm.
If you sit on your screen and you type into this little
Yeah.
thing and just send it, like you're being so like arrogant, or like you're talking down to us, like you're minimizing. Yeah, I am. It's
Mm-hmm.
an email. Have you seen the world?
Yeah.
Do you see where we live? Is South Africa, Korea, like the things that are around the world? People are being bombed,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't send an email sharing some thoughts. And what's interesting is that, like, I thought with the advent of AI and LLMs, like it would massively increase the creative output
Mm-hmm.
of the people who I know or in my world, or like even some of my students. It has not,
Mm-mm.
not at all.
Mm-mm.
It's other people have. Other people who are okay with putting slop out there are, but man, that's when I realized this years ago. But this was further confirmation that has nothing to do with your skill level. It's all up in here.
Yep.
It's a mindset. So yeah,
100%. Yeah, and what you're talking about now, I've got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and one of the words that I'm being very careful, like using around them or even being used around them, is this idea of overwhelm. Because we're talking a lot, in our work. My work is around emotional intelligence, and it's like, hey, we want to acknowledge that there are problems, but we don't want to acknowledge them so deeply that they like hamstring us to the point we can't move forward. And I'm like, listen, I understand in this moment this feels like a lot, but overwhelm is a tsunami. Like, I have no choice in the matter. I will be washed away. That is what it means to be overwhelmed. you're just carrying something. You're noticing the weight of something that it will make you stronger in your ability to carry it. And my brother is a functional neurologist, got a great practice here in Atlanta. And he talks about we are now, and he sees this in his clinical work all the time, he said, we're confusing discomfort for trauma. He's like,
Yep.
trauma is something that is shattered or broken that will take decades to undo and fix. Discomfort is a workout. Like, oh, I was uncomfortable, my muscles are sore. I've even torn fibers that are now busy re-knitting, and we're confusing in this era discomfort and trauma. And I see that in my clients, like you see it in yours when I'm talking to executives and they're like, da, 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 and I'm like, okay, let's make sure that I'm acknowledging the discomfort, but let's not accidentally call it something that's going to break a vertical or disrupt the company. It's like, this is just a little bit of discomfort that we have to get creative around.
I love that analogy about trauma and discomfort. I love that you mentioned your brother was a functional neurologist. So when I've been working out over the last couple of years, I worked with a personal trainer, and he was like, "Hey, what's your goal? What's your goal?" I was like, I want to be able to move well. I want to feel good. The aesthetic look is not that important to me. I feel like whatever that comes with time. So we did a lot of functional training, and I'm not used to moving my body that way.
Mm-hmm.
I played a lot of basketball as a kid, played for my high school, and stopped after high school.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think that I pick up sports pretty well, but I'm not moving like that. I'm not active like that. And now it's been 20 some odd years. And so I remember the first couple of weeks, first 2, 3 weeks, he would have me do things like just breathing exercises or dead bugs for your core
Mm-hmm.
and all this sort of and like compound movements. And I would literally have to take a nap after every workout. He's just downstairs. So I hacked my own system. This guy owns a gym literally downstairs from our building. It takes
Amazing.
about 45 seconds for me to walk there. And if I miss a workout, he can stand outside and yell at me and be like, come to this. So I had no excuse, right? And I was asking him, what is going on? Why am I so tired? We're not even pushing weights. We're just doing functional work. He's like, well, your central nervous system doesn't know how to handle moving more than two muscle groups at a time because you're such a slug and sitting in front of your computer all
Here
day,
we are, sitting down. Yeah.
It's like, well, to do this and a rotation and press these dumbbells. I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not trauma.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I got over it after a couple of workouts. I
Mm-hmm.
still get tired. I still push but like we've lost sight of what we can actually handle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just, I'm from Jersey, so we're like that. You just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
We're like, nah, you're just wussing out. No, don't bring that here. Like,
Yeah.
just be responsible. Carry your own bag.
Yeah.
It's your life. You gotta do it.
And to that point, it's asking the question, like the trainer said, like, what do you want? And I think that's the biggest problem that I see in this is on one side of the spectrum, it's going, don't let anything be uncomfortable ever. So I'll just sit at my desk and turn into one of the characters from Wall-E that, floats around in space and drinks my milkshake from the side and can't move their body. On the other side of the spectrum, you have your David Gogginses of the world who's like, just run on broken feet. And I'm like, I don't know if David needs a hug. Like, I'm not trying to get the whole world to be in that space. And so lots of respect to the work that David's doing, but I think there might actually be trauma there. And I don't think Mike, because he details it in his book. So I don't necessarily want to transfer trauma across the universe. But I think there is this space in between. And I think this gets kind of to our next question in finding success. I think is all around this question of what the trainer asks, like, what do you want? And in our work, we talk about a curiosity. What's the problem you want to be known for solving? And
Mhm.
if you can focus on that thing, all of a sudden you'll show up differently than if it's just going, I don't really know what I want, but it's supposed to be this. I'm supposed to be a lawyer or a doctor because failure is the only third option. So I guess I'll just show up. And then what do? We disappear in our own life. And even sometimes when we get the thing called success, this is when people, will end their life because they're like, well, this isn't what I was promised. And so the whole thing is a bad book of, business or whatever. So the question that I would ask you is, having been around people, and I was even, on social the other day, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. One of my favorite authors follows Mike. So here's Donald Miller, reading your stuff, or whoever else is on there doing the same thing. So from the outside in, if anybody's watching that, they're going, oh, this must be what success feels like. Let me look at Mike. But I'm always interested in, okay, when the bill comes, was it worth it? And so I guess the question I would ask, however you're defining in success in this season of your life, what would you say it cost you? And knowing that now, looking back in hindsight, would you want to pay that bill again?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it costs you your pride.
Mm.
I think that success, again, this is just my perspective. Success for me has always been born out of getting to know myself and growing in my self-awareness and taking accountability and responsibility for both the good and the bad. I think the way that I grew up, the shame was a very loud voice in my life. If you compound Asian culture with religion on top of it, you just have a shame cocktail. It's great for feeling like crap all the time and feeling like something's wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
And then you get into the comparison traps with other high performers and things like that. And I think a lot of people the people who know me might think that I'm very, very successful. And I really don't care that much about my external accomplishments and what I look at from the outside because I live with myself every day. I always tell people, love yourself. It's who you have to spend the rest of your life with.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to unlearn that,
Hmm.
believing that it was something external, that I needed validation from God or a spouse or a family member or some stranger who reads my words on the internet that I'll never meet.
Hmm.
Um, those are nice things to have. I'm not saying that if I got completely deleted from the internet and got isolated or canceled that it wouldn't hurt,
Hmm.
but it's not as big of a deal
Right.
as people I think people think it is. Um, but it costs you your pride. Getting back to that, it costs you these habits that you may develop to numb yourself. It costs you sometimes your greatest strength at some point turns into one of your greatest weaknesses.
Mm.
As an example, growing up, my dad was crazy. He was nuts, I mean, he probably
I had
was
one of those.
borderline.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just really explosive, just very, very toxic. And I can see how my sister, my mom, and I grew up, just on eggshells, and that affected everything. Um, about 7 years ago, we hadn't talked for years. He reached out, and I was 40 at the time. And it was one of those moments, Carl, where you just know like a decision tree in your life, like yes or no. That's it. You hit the green button or the red button. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I responded. We ended up talking for an hour. I went to visit him the next year in Hawaii where he was living. And for the last 6, 7 years, we had a great relationship. He passed away about half a year ago,
Wow.
and um, I have an incredible amount of peace and contentment in my life. And it's because I passed that test. I didn't do it necessarily for myself. I did.
Hmm.
I'm glad that we had that relationship. I have all those text messages saved. I flew over to Korea. He was dying of cancer. And I went back there last May and I was there with him on his deathbed,
Wow.
and um, that's, if you think about, if you can do that kind of work, I'm not propping myself up. I'm just saying from experience, that's obviously going to affect the way that I show up at work and show up for other people and show up for my friends and my family and myself.
Hmm.
I'm proud of myself. I
Yeah.
don't
It
take
should
pride
be.
in myself, but I'm proud, right? And that's the thing, that oftentimes becoming proud of yourself requires you to lower your pride.
Hmm.
And that can show up in business. I can say, well, I've written this many books, so work with this guy, that lady, the big names, and choose to cordon myself off and not learn. No, I want to be teachable. I learn from people all the time.
Hmm.
That is a huge trap, that I can walk in with all my laurels and my trophies. There's always going to be somebody better, first of all. And second, what good does that do? We have this whole shift going on in the landscape right now with AI and all this going on. I'm learning from people who are half my age. I'm delighted to. I want to pay them. I'm like, I'm the old guy in the room. Help me understand this.
Yeah.
That. So it costs you your pride. Success really costs you your pride. It doesn't mean you can't be proud of your accomplishments, but it will cost you your pride. You'll eat a lot of humble pie, and I would do it over again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I can share. that has been absolutely transformative has been a gratitude practice. I talk about this a lot.
Okay.
Years ago, I had always been sort of a semi journaler. I like to journal things, as the writer in me. And when I went through a divorce about 7 years ago, a really crazy time in my life, and I was journaling, and then I stopped journaling because I realized when I looked back on my journal entries, I was like, dude, this guy's a whiny, 4-letter word. Like, I wouldn't want to hang out with this guy. All he does is complain.
Yeah.
And that's what I was writing. So I started looking for other solutions because I
Hmm.
just stopped journaling. And I was like, does anyone have recommendations? I went online and I saw all these people talking about this thing called the 5-minute journal.
Yep.
And for those who aren't familiar, clearly you are, Carl, but like all you do is you just write down 3 things that you're grateful for in the morning, 3 things that would make the day great that you can control, and an affirmation. It takes about 5 minutes. And in the evening, you write 3 great things that happened today and what you learned. And so I have now done this every day for 3.5 years.
Mm.
I have like 8 or 9 of these journals sitting, back there. And once in a while I go look back and look at them. And what it has done is it has um, lowered my highs and elevated my lows to where I'm very baseline. And the day that my book, You're the Brand, hit the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, it was one of 3 good things that happened that day.
Yeah.
It kept it in perspective.
Hmm.
And I started to notice these patterns. Again, consistency, right? I started to notice these patterns. Man, the things that I'm grateful for every day that I did was I got my workout in, I ate clean, and I cut drinking, or I didn't drink that day.
Hmm.
I just started to know. I was like, maybe this is actually what's making me happy in my life, and not these big professional accomplishments that the internet loses its mind about.
Right.
Dude, honestly, it's absolutely life changing. And when
That's
things are hard, when my dad died, that was one of 3 things that happened that day. And so it helps you stay very, very grounded, and it gives you a real picture of what's going on in your life and what you're focused on. It's beautiful. It's been
that is
beautiful.
stunning. And the interesting thing in your story that I'm hearing there is in my world, the language that I use around this is it's the difference between balance and order.
Mm,
And I think all of us, it doesn't matter our age at this point, men, women, if you've been on the earth for a decent amount of time, you've been sold this idea of work life balance. And
mm,
me, I operate a lot of times as, kind of a de facto chief people officer inside these organizations. And the thing they're always going is like, how do we help our executives or our managers get this work life balance? And then I have to break and burst the bubble of going, it doesn't exist. And so, if you talk about your dad or anybody that you respect in your life, I would just always ask the question. I was like, okay, so give me 3 people, men or women, who you value their physical health, their financial health, their spiritual health, their relational health, their professional acumen, and that those things are equally balanced all the time. And I've been asking this question now for 15 years, and you can kind of, it's your exact reaction. Every single time people are like, that's an insane question, Carl. I don't know a person. And so I'm like, okay, so can we just then for a second take this giant theory of work life balance, because it's predicated on the word balance, and understand that it's a unicorn, it's a leprechaun, it's the gold at the end of the rainbow. It is a mythology that doesn't exist in an everyday space. So then it's like, well, now if we're depressed by that and been like, hold on, I've been chasing work life balance and you're telling me I've been chasing a leprechaun for the last 20 years of my adult life, then what does exist? Well, what I think, and my thesis around this, which is probably the next book that I'll wrangle Jeff Goins into helping me write, is this idea of you have to establish order. Because the visible universe is predicated on order. If I want to grow a beautiful crop, I'm going to take a seed, I'm going to like make some ground fertile, and then I'm going to plant it, and then I'm going to water it, and I'm going to protect it. And then over time, poof, all of a sudden, I've got something I can eat. That is an ordered step of things. And what I hear you talking about in this journey over the last 7 years, which by the way, it's fascinating that you talk about this, because neurologically speaking, you are an entirely different human than you were 7 years ago. And we're not talking about just from neuroplasticity and your ability to change, but from an atomic level in your DNA, everything has replicated itself, and this is how we age, right? There's less elasticity on those things, but you're physically a completely different human than you were 7 years ago. And so 3.5 years into that gratitude exercise, it's literally building the next version of Mike to go, here's my order. This is what
Mm,
I thought was important today. And our brain is a supercomputer. If we change the inputs, it will automatically change the program that it's outputting. And so, like in my world, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I have to live with me. And so, in your framework, you're like, I'm reducing or exterminating my pride so that I can enjoy the things that I'm doing. So your would might be, I don't have pride, but I'm proud of myself. Mine would be, I don't have pride. I enjoy myself. I'm
mm,
on the journey to enjoyment in this singularity of just me on my own. And I think in our world, people will go, well, how insanely selfish. And it's like, no, it's the same principle of if you and I get on a plane, what's the first thing we're going to hear? Hey, when the masks drop, you got to put your own on first or else everybody dies. If you, I mean, I'm 6'2", 230 pounds. If I fall over on Mike, everybody's going to die. He's like, Carl, I need you to put your mask on first because if you pass out, we're having a bad day over
yeah.
here. And it's the same thing in life. If Mike's not journaling and enjoying himself, he is now just exporting garbage into the world. And the same thing for me. And so it's going in the order of my life. It goes me and spiritual journey, all those things. So you and I, by the way, we're going to have to grab a drink together at some point because all of the lived experiences sound very similar. So mine is African shame mixed with Southern evangelicalism. So I was also a musician and around the church world for many, many years. And so it was very fortunate though that somehow I came out of the factory broken in that my shame button hadn't been installed. So even though it was culturally around, that I had a very different experience in that. But
Mm,
the beauty of my lived experience over the last 20 years is my order now goes Carl and Carl, spiritual journey, something bigger, gratitude journal, like progressing as a different versions of myself. Then me and the spouse, then me and the kids, then me and the work. And every day it's making sure, am I orienting to that brand
mm,
or is that an aspirational brand, but it's not really who I am? And it's just
mm.
making sure that there's a convergence of that order, that who I think I am and who I want to be is actually who I'm showing up and how my calendar says, oh, this is really who Carl is.
Yeah, I love that. I got this from something. This illustration really helped me, especially when I was going through. So my business started. I went full time in my business about 3 months before my wife of 10 years was like, "I don't want to be married anymore," and that came out of nowhere for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
We had just bought a huge house. Like this was it. And she was like, "Yeah, I don't want to be married anymore." So it sent my life into this just crazy season. Um, and like I met with a lady named Susie Miller. Susie had been a counselor and therapist, and then she moved more into coaching so she could meet with people virtually because as a therapist, I guess the regulations at that time meant she had to meet with people in person. And Susie had known a little bit of my work. She understood kind of what my work entailed, my work life entailed. She has been a speaker and author herself, so she got it. And she shared this analogy with me. I jotted this down where you were talking about balance and order. She gave me the word harmony, and I really liked this. And what she meant by that was the appropriate amount of attention to the appropriate thing for the appropriate amount of time. And I was like, oh, okay. And that made sense to me as a musician, and you are one as well. It's like you hear a song or an orchestral piece, the violins aren't blasting the entire piece. It's the appropriate amount of attention to the appropriate thing, the violins for their little solo or their pass for the appropriate amount of time for that one passage.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, balance is a lie. That's how you look at your life. And so she was like, look, this marriage, this relationship, you need to pay some attention to this and you need to give it the appropriate amount of attention for the appropriate amount of time. But if it's not going out anywhere after the appropriate amount of attention and time, I'm going to tell you and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to give you the best insight and advice that I can. And I've taken that approach, Carl, into work, into other dynamics. When I went back to Korea to go see my dad last year, I was there for 2-3 weeks. I mean, it's the appropriate amount of attention for the appropriate thing,
Yeah.
right? So that's helped me a lot. in terms of, am I over giving attention and time to this thing, or am I underdoing it?
Hmm.
And that's really, really helped me a lot. It's helped me in my work. It's helped me in my personal life. And those things will, the sliders, right? They change over time. You get older, you got to pay a little bit more attention to your health,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah. So, no, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really insightful.
No, and likewise, I love the harmony example that you're giving because in the leadership work, it's this idea that you have written much more successful books than I have, and I'm on my first one. And then I jokingly tell clients all the time, I'm about to write a book you probably don't need to read because all of self leadership is really summed up with three things. It is the harmony and the rhythmic nature of attention, intention, and commitment. Am I willing to give my attention to the right problem, my intention to two possible solutions, and my commitment to a deadline that will yield a result worth having? And like you said, it's the harmony of those things, whether it's talking to nieces and nephews or kids, whether it's talking to friends or spouses or our work and going, okay, how am I giving this thing my attention? And then how am I giving it my intention? And then how am I adjusting my commitment? Because they'll need different things on my mother's deathbed than I will need at like her, 68th birthday party. And so, but the problem, as you and I both know, is there's actually a shocking lack of intentionality
Hmm.
in culture because we're moving so fast and the world is so loud. And I do think the most interesting people that I come across, and probably you come across, is even why I'm loving our conversation right now. Is like, when's the last time we had, I don't know, what are we at now, 40 minutes of uninterrupted time where we just kind of eyeball to eyeball going, I want to learn from Mike. That's such a high value of the most expensive thing you own, which is your attention. But then also, you were so deeply willing to give me some intentional space to talk. I mean, those are the things I think for me in living an interesting, ordered life requires the harmony of those three things, which I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you about the intentionality. It's just, it's not there, and the more time that passes, the more I realize, there's my dog,
Yeah.
that that I'm not going to get where I want by just hoping.
Yes.
I'm not going for a drive. You could do that when you're a little younger and explore options, but now I'm like, no, where are we going? How long
Hmm.
is it going to take to get there? How much gas do we need?
Hmm.
How much do we need to charge the car?
Hmm.
I'm not going to stumble my way into a place of peace and contentment. I can be content in the midst of challenges and say this too will pass,
Right.
but you got to set a goal. You've got to set some sort of a vision and work towards that. I love this phrase. Some other guys are way wealthier, and I don't mean wealth as a signal of their like character, but the volume by which they've built certain systems around them and in their life, right, that show up in their finances. And all of them who have run companies, they just continually ruthlessly ask themselves, what am I optimizing for?
So,
What is it that I'm optimizing for? Is it optimizing to get my time back? Is it optimizing my health? Is it optimizing for a return on this business? Like, what am I working towards? Everything else is just a distraction.
it's a noise.
And yeah, it's just noise. Yep.
Yeah, for people who are wanting to dig into those things deeper, I would imagine, Mike has other different names, but I think of Dan Martell with Buying Back Your Time. I think of like a Tim Ferriss going, how do I, biohack my body? And then finally, like a John Acuff thinking around goals. And these are people who you can read their books or a dozen other different versions of this. But to your point, it's, am I going to be intentional with my scarcest resource? Because as we age, we're going, oh, time is becoming more scarce. I'm looking back at more time than I have maybe going forward. And some people would look at that as morbid. And I look at that going, I still have the vitality of mentality that I did at 20 to go like, oh, the world
Mm,
is exciting and there's lots of wonder and whimsy. But also, I can't move through the world like a 20-year-old because I just don't have the same physical resources or the horizon in front of me is getting shorter. So how do I leverage that?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'd love to end with this last question, which is kind of, the name of the whole podcast is one great question. And Mike, in our philosophy, around leadership and self-leadership and emotional intelligence, the basic idea is that the world has lots of simple answers, but what we need are better questions. And the premise there then becomes like one great question can change everything. And so I'd love, as you know, you think back, and this could be recent or over the course of your whole life, what was a question that somebody asked you that still kind of, is tumbling around in your head? You're like, oh man, that was such a great question. And I'll preface this. I'll tell you the one that Jeff Goins asked me after I was laid off years and years ago. And I was in this really low and kind of shattered place. And I went up to his place in Franklin and was like, hey man, what should I do next? And Jeff, very kindly in his direct way that said, hey, man, for the best question to ask her, I know that's the stupidest question you've ever asked. And I was like, what do you mean? I got to pay bills and I got to figure out. He's like, the question isn't what should you do? The question is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I was like, yes. And so that question changed the trajectory of my life
Mm.
and launched this company called Curiosity, and everything is different because of that. So I'm curious for you. It doesn't have to be professional. It could be, personal, but it could have been about like your favorite ice cream. I don't know. But is there a question that's kind of rattled around in your head and your heart that feels like it's changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, I have two in my mind, but I'll share the one that came from within. Um, this is 2009. I was working on staff at a church in Connecticut. I was 30, and I flew out to Colorado to meet this guy who was kind of at the top of the mountain of that industry that I was in. He was
Yeah.
the same position, huge congregation, did the music part, and he was probably about 15 years older than me at the time. And I went out to Colorado. He was willing to give me some one-on-one time. We sat down for 30 or 45 minutes. And I was stunned because when I left, went back to my hotel, I stayed in town for a conference that they were hosting. And I said to myself, "See, he's 15 years older than me, 17 years older." It's like, if everything went right, would I want this guy's life in 15 years? And to my utter shock, I said, no, not a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the first time that I recall where I've really started to intentionally pick up the rock and look at what's under it. Every rock that I saw, all the structures that I saw. The crazy thing is, I'm now the age that guy was when I met him.
Yeah.
So that would be like me talking to a 30-year-old version of me.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I didn't want his life at all in any way, shape, or form. And I realized I was working so hard to climb the mountain, it was the wrong mountain. A book that has been helpful that I came across in the last year talking about that is appropriately called The Second Mountain.
Okay.
And it's written by a guy named David Brooks. Really good read.
Okay.
And I highly recommend. I sat with it for a while, and it's helped me also understand that this mountain that I've climbed for the last 10 years is probably not it.
Yeah.
There's another thing. So I almost feel like I'm on the third version of myself in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea where it's going to go. But like you said, you adapt, you acquire these skills and these competencies. You still have the mental, the vitality of mentality to trust that you're going to move forward. You just have to play a different game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just keep looking at myself and very successful people because our culture is obsessed with that. And I've been around a lot of successful and well-to-do people and been close enough also to see their lives. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
just
I
because
don't
you
like
have
how
one
that
doesn't mean
sausage
you
is
that.
made. Yeah.
Yeah, just because you have one doesn't mean you have the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I just keep asking myself whenever I get enamored with somebody, do I want this guy's life? Do I want Alex Hormozy's life?
Yeah.
He grinds
Hard
about
pass.
how, 15 hours a day writing I'm like, no, I don't think so. I mean, that's great for him. He's
Yeah,
young.
he loves it. Him and Layla love it.
Yeah, the 9 figures in business, great. At this point in my life, no, seriously, no. I'll
Yeah.
learn, but I won't try to emulate
Mm-hmm.
my life after. So yeah, that's
It's a
fill in the blank.
fantastic
Yeah,
question. Yeah. Do I want this person's life in the
yeah,
15 years? What a
yeah.
great question. Well, I want to be in this space. I want people to know how they can connect with you. Kind of what's the problem that Mike is currently solving on the second mountain before he gets to the third mountain. So if somebody was wanting to engage in your work right now, Mike, what is the problem that you're solving, and then how could they find ways to engage and get around you?
These days, I'm talking a lot about having a clear voice, especially in an age of AI. We're getting drowned out, not just by AI, but by the noise everywhere, politically, sociologically, just everything. And I see a real need to protect the one thing that makes us who we are, which is our humanity. I've been around that in personal branding, marketing, communications, writing, and I feel like I'm on this mission. Like, hey, remember that you're human. Remember to safeguard your brain. Like, don't outsource all your thinking. I've been kicking this phrase around, and people present AI is the Ozempic of thinking. You know, we're not necessarily shrinking our bodies, but we're making our brains really smooth. You know,
I love that.
it's
No
the
wonder
last
that.
thing, yeah,
Yeah,
that we
that's
got.
so
So
good.
I write about this stuff every Tuesday. I should just share other tidbits of wisdom and storytelling and communication and things I've learned. And you guys can all go to mykim.com/newsletter. It's super simple. I don't really market anything. It's just my best thoughts every Tuesday. And I repurpose that on my podcast. I just
Mhm.
read it on my podcast and on my YouTube channel. And I tell you what, it's simplified my life so much that the best thinking is coming out in years. And it has made my life less busy because I'm just focused on one good piece of content a week. So yeah,
And
mykim.com/newsletter.
MikeKim.com. Well, I will make sure that everybody sees that in the show notes. And Mike, I just deeply appreciate your willingness to come on and share your insights. It's brilliant. And we need more people talking about this because in our world, it's this idea that, we train around emotional intelligence. And so the idea is that AI is making IQ cheaper by the minute and EQ more expensive by the second.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And but it's not as good as that is Ozempic for. I mean, that's so good. That's so true. And I think one of the things is as well is I know that at some point you were also doing kind of some in person stuff. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much in person connection will just be at a premium in the future because it's like, oh, I know for a fact that this isn't being GPT'd or Clauded or like this is your thought from your mouth to my ears, and oh, how refreshing is that?
Yep. Oh yeah.
And
It's
so,
absolutely going to happen. It's already happening.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for the time, Mike. I really appreciate you being on with us.
It was an honor to be with you. Thank you, Carl.
All right, man. I'll catch you
Be
next
well.
time. Cheers.
Bye bye.